Thunder rolled across the mountains like angry drums. Walter Grimsby sat in his wooden chair, watching rain hammer against the windows of his cabin. He had lived alone here for 5 years now, ever since Martha passed. The isolation suited him. No neighbors to bother him. No questions about why he never smiled anymore. Just him, the mountains, and memories he tried not to think about. A flash lit up the entire valley. Walter jerked upright. That wasn't lightning. The light was blue-white and streaked across the sky like a falling star, except it was moving too slowly. He watched it arc downward and disappear behind the ridge about half a mile from his property. A dull boom followed seconds later, shaking the cabin walls. Walter grabbed his heavy coat and flashlight. His joints protested as he stood, reminding him that 73 years had taken their toll. But curiosity pulled him forward. In 40 years as an engineer, he had seen plenty of aircraft crashes. This looked different. The trajectory was all wrong. The rain soaked through his coat within minutes. Walter trudged up the muddy trail, his boots squelching with each step. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating sheets of rain and twisted pine trees. The smell hit him first. Burning metal and something else. Something sharp and chemical that made his nose wrinkle. He found the crash site in a small clearing. A pod no bigger than a car had plowed through the earth and come to rest against a boulder. Its surface was smooth and dark, covered in symbols that definitely weren't from any human alphabet. Steam rose from its hull, hissing as rain hit the hot metal. Walter approached carefully. The pod had split open along one side, revealing a dim interior lit by failing orange lights. He knelt down, ignoring the mud soaking his knees, and peered inside. 2 large eyes stared back at him. Walter stumbled backward, nearly dropping his flashlight. The creature inside made a sound, something between a hiss and a whimper. As his heart stopped racing, Walter forced himself to look again. It was small, maybe the size of a house cat. Its body was covered in scales that shimmered even in the weak light, shifting from deep purple to midnight blue. 4 legs ended in clawed feet and a long tail wrapped around its body. But what caught Walter's attention were the wings. Thin membranes stretched between delicate bones, and one wing hung at an odd angle, clearly damaged. The creature's head was reptilian but somehow expressive, with those enormous eyes that seemed far too intelligent for an animal. A baby dragon. The thought was absurd, but Walter couldn't think of any other way to describe it. The creature tried to stand, wobbled, and collapsed. It opened its mouth and a small burst of blue energy sparked out, dissipating harmlessly in the rain. A warning. A defense from something that was clearly terrified. Walter held up his hands slowly. "Easy there," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dragon thing watched him with those impossibly large eyes. Its breathing was rapid and shallow. Walter could see blood, dark purple against the lighter scales seeping from wounds on its side and damaged wing. He had 2 choices: walk away and let nature take its course, or help. Martha's voice echoed in his memory. "Walter Grimsby, you've never walked away from anything broken in your life." "Don't start now," Walter sighed. "All right, little one. Let's get you somewhere dry." He took off his coat and approached slowly, talking in a low, steady voice about nothing in particular. The weather, the mountains, how his knees hurt, anything to keep the creature calm. When he got close enough, he carefully wrapped the coat around the dragon's body, mindful of the injured wing. The creature struggled weakly, sparks of blue energy flickering around its mouth. But it was too hurt and exhausted to put up much fight. Walter lifted it gently. It weighed almost nothing, all delicate bones and tension. The journey back to the cabin took twice as long. Walter's arms ached and his back screamed, but he didn't stop. Rain continued to pour down, turning the trail into a stream of mud. Several times he nearly slipped, catching himself at the last second to avoid dropping his strange burden. Finally, the cabin appeared through the trees. Walter shouldered through the door and kicked it shut behind him. He carried the creature to his workshop, a converted spare room filled with tools and half-finished projects. He cleared off his workbench with one arm, sending screwdrivers and circuit boards clattering to the floor, and gently laid the dragon down. In the bright workshop lights, he could see the creature more clearly. The scales were beautiful, each one catching the light differently. The injured wing trembled with each breath. Those eyes never left his face, tracking his every movement. Walter washed his hands and gathered supplies: bandages, antiseptic, wire for a splint. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, falling into patterns he had learned decades ago when he used to patch up equipment and occasionally people in remote research stations. "This is going to sting," he warned, though he doubted the creature understood. He cleaned the wounds as gently as possible. The dragon made small sounds of pain but didn't try to bite him. Its eyes squeezed shut, and Walter felt something strange brush against his mind. Not words exactly, more like an impression: fear, pain, confusion, and underneath it all, a question. A desperate, wordless question that seemed to echo in his thoughts. "Can I trust you?" Walter paused, meeting those ancient-looking eyes in that young face. "Yeah," he said quietly. "You can trust me." He worked through the night, splinting the damaged wing and bandaging the wounds. The creature watched him the entire time. That feeling of questioning uncertainty gradually fading into something else. Not quite trust yet, but maybe the beginning of it. As dawn began to lighten the sky, Walter finally stepped back. The dragon was clean, bandaged, and resting on a nest of old blankets. Its breathing had steadied. Walter pulled up a chair and sat down heavily, every muscle in his body protesting. The creature's eyes were starting to close. Before they did, Walter noticed something on the workbench. A small crystal, no bigger than his thumb, had fallen from the pod when he unwrapped his coat. It was smooth and clear, with symbols etched into its surface that glowed faintly. Walter picked it up carefully. Some kind of data storage, maybe. Information about where this creature came from. Why it was here. He glanced at the dragon, now sleeping fitfully. Tomorrow he would figure out what to do. Tonight he just wanted to make sure this small broken thing survived until morning. Outside, unknown to Walter, a ship slipped past Earth's moon. Its sensors locked onto a faint energy signature. A signature that matched a stolen escape pod. The hunt was not over. Sunlight poured through the workshop windows, turning dust motes into tiny galaxies. Walter woke with a start, his neck stiff from sleeping in the chair. For a moment he thought last night had been a dream. Then he saw the creature curled up on the workbench, wrapped in blankets, very much real. The dragon lifted its head and watched him. The fear from last night had dulled slightly, replaced by cautious observation. Walter stood slowly, his spine popping like bubble wrap. He was too old for all-night rescue missions. "Hungry?" he asked. The creature tilted its head. Walter took that as a maybe and headed to the kitchen. He wasn't sure what alien dragons ate, but he figured he would start with the basics. He scrambled some eggs, cooked a piece of chicken, and for good measure, cut up an apple. He brought everything back on a plate. The dragon's nostrils flared as it smelled the food. Walter set the plate down within reach and backed away, giving it space. The creature hesitated, then stretched its neck forward and delicately took a piece of chicken. It chewed slowly, thoughtfully, then took another piece, and another. Within minutes, the plate was clean. "Good appetite," Walter noted. "That's a good sign." He spent the morning making the workshop more comfortable. He found an old dog bed in the garage, left over from a pet he and Martha had owned years ago, and set it up in the corner with more blankets. He adjusted the temperature and closed the curtains partway to dim the harsh sunlight. The dragon watched everything with intense focus. Walter got the sense it was learning, cataloging information about its new environment, about him. On the second day, Walter remembered the crystal. He had tucked it into his pocket and forgotten about it. Now he pulled it out and examined it more carefully. The symbols glowed when he touched them, and he felt a faint warmth. Some kind of interface, but how did it work? The dragon made a chirping sound. Walter looked over to find it staring at the crystal with recognition. The creature struggled to stand on 3 legs, keeping weight off the injured side, and hobbled closer. It touched the crystal with one claw, and suddenly the workshop filled with light. Holographic images projected from the crystal, floating in the air. Walter stumbled back, knocking over his chair. The images showed star systems, planets, and creatures that looked like adult versions of his small guest. They were magnificent, with wingspans that could probably cover his entire cabin. The holograms showed them flying through space, their scales glowing with inner light. Text appeared, but it was in an alien language Walter couldn't read. However, one section seemed to respond to the dragon's presence. Diagrams appeared showing the creature's biology. What it ate. How its body worked. Walter leaned closer, fascinated. The holograms indicated the species could digest almost any protein and needed certain minerals he could probably find in supplements. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Walter would prepare meals based on what he learned from the crystal. The dragon, which he started calling Ember because of the way its scales glowed, would eat and then rest. The wounds were healing quickly, faster than any earth animal could manage. But the wing would take time. Walter noticed something else. Sometimes when he was near Ember, he would feel things that weren't his own emotions, a sense of gratitude, contentment when the food was good, anxiety when loud noises came from outside. It was subtle, like hearing a whisper in another room, but it was definitely there. One evening, as Walter sat reading a book, a stronger impression hit him. Images, not words, flashes of memory from Ember's mind. A large ship, adult dragons flying through its corridors, then chaos, explosions, fear. Two larger dragons, probably parents, pushing a small Ember into a pod, desperate love and goodbye in their eyes. The pod launching. Looking back to see the ship breaking apart in flame, Walter's book slipped from his hands. He looked at Ember, who had her eyes squeezed shut, trembling. Without thinking, he reached out and gently placed his hand on her head. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I'm so sorry that happened to you." Ember opened her eyes, and for the first time she didn't flinch from his touch. Instead, she pressed her head into his palm. Trust. Finally, real trust. But the peace couldn't last. On the 5th day, Walter heard helicopters. He looked out the window to see military aircraft circling the valley, flying low. His stomach dropped. They were searching for something. Probably the crash site. He quickly carried Ember down to the basement. Years ago, when he first built this cabin, he had constructed a hidden room behind a false wall, a paranoid habit from his days working on classified projects. He had never thought he would actually use it. The room was small and dark, but it would have to do. He settled Ember on a cushion and brought down food and water. "Stay quiet," he told her. "Don't make any noise, no matter what you hear." Ember's emotions pressed against his mind, confusion, fear, but also trust. She would do what he asked. Walter barely made it back upstairs before a knock rattled his door. He took a breath, composed his face into a mask of elderly irritation, and opened it. 3 people stood on his porch. 2 wore military uniforms and carried equipment that beeped and whirred. The 3rd was a woman in a suit holding an identification badge. "Mr. Grimsby?" the woman said. "I'm Agent Ford with the Department of Defense. We're investigating an unidentified crash in this area. Have you seen or heard anything unusual in the past week?" Walter leaned against the doorframe, playing up his age. "Unusual? Define unusual. I hear coyotes every night. Is that unusual enough?" Agent Ford didn't smile. "A craft of unknown origin crashed approximately 6 miles from your location. We detected the impact signature. We need to locate it." "Haven't seen any craft," Walter said truthfully. He had seen a pod, not a craft. Details mattered. One of the soldiers held up a device. It was beeping faster. "Ma'am, I'm getting readings here. Faint but present. Some kind of biological signature that doesn't match Earth fauna." Walter's heart hammered, but he kept his face blank. "I've got a raccoon problem. Maybe that's what you're picking up." Agent Ford studied him for a long moment. "Mr. Grimsby, if you're harboring anything of extraterrestrial origin, that's a violation of federal law. The penalties are severe. Am I under arrest?" "Not yet. But we'll be monitoring this area. If you remember anything, call this number." She handed him a card. Walter watched them return to their helicopter and fly away, but he noticed they didn't go far. They landed on a ridge about 2 miles away, setting up camp. They would be watching. He went back to the basement and found Ember pressed into the corner, her scales dark with stress. The feeling radiating from her was pure terror, not of the agents, but of something else. Through their strange connection, Walter felt it too. A presence. Cold. Predatory. Hunting. Somewhere above Earth's atmosphere, something had detected Ember's signal, and it was coming. Walter sat down heavily on the basement floor. "We're in trouble, little one. Big trouble." Ember moved closer and rested her head on his knee. The message was clear. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Walter had faced dangerous situations before. Equipment failures in deep space stations. Reactor malfunctions. Once, a fire that nearly killed his entire crew. But this felt different. This time he wasn't protecting machinery or following safety protocols. He was protecting a life that had chosen to trust him. The government agents stayed on the ridge for 3 days. Walter could see their tents through his binoculars. At night, their lights looked like artificial stars. Ember remained in the basement during daylight hours, only coming up after dark when Walter was certain no one was watching. Her wing was healing well. She could extend it now without pain, though she still couldn't fly. Walter had been exercising it gently, the way the crystal's medical diagram suggested. Ember endured the physical therapy with patience, seeming to understand it was necessary. On the 4th night, Walter made a decision. He needed information. He needed to know what the government knew and what they planned to do if they found Ember. He pulled out an old satellite phone, one with an encrypted line he had maintained even in retirement. He called a number he hadn't dialed in 15 years. "Grimsby?" The voice on the other end sounded shocked. "I thought you were dead." "Not yet, Patterson. I need a favor." Colonel David Patterson had worked with Walter on several classified projects back in the day. They had saved each other's lives more than once. If anyone could get information from inside military channels, it was him. "What kind of favor?" Patterson asked cautiously. "There's a search operation happening in my area. Department of Defense. I need to know what they're really looking for and what orders they're operating under." Silence on the line. Then, "Walter, if you're involved in something, you need to tell me. Can you get the information or not?" Another pause. "Give me 24 hours, Patterson called back in 18. "You've stepped in it, old friend. There are 2 operations running simultaneously. The official one is defense, looking for what they're calling a potential biological hazard. Standard first contact protocols. Contain, study, evaluate threat level. And the unofficial one? A special projects division. They want whatever crashed for its technology. They have orders to secure it by any means necessary. They're not interested in diplomacy or study. They want weapons applications." Walter's jaw tightened. "And if they find a living specimen? Dissection. Vivisection if it's still alive. They'll reverse engineer everything they can." Patterson's voice dropped. "Walter, what did you find?" Walter hung up without answering. He looked at Ember, who sat beside him on the couch. She had been listening, understanding his emotions even if she couldn't understand the words. Her eyes were wide with fear. "They're not getting you," Walter said firmly. "I don't care what I have to do. They're not touching you." That night he started packing. Food, water, medical supplies, tools. He loaded everything into his old truck. If the agents closed in, he would run. He had friends scattered across the country, people who owed him favors. Someone would hide them. But fate didn't give him the chance to run. The attack came 2 nights later. Walter woke to Ember's distress pressing against his mind like a scream. He grabbed the pistol he kept in his nightstand and ran to the window. A figure moved through the darkness outside, but it wasn't human. It was too tall, too angular, moving in ways that defied normal anatomy. The door exploded inward. Walter fired 3 times, but the bullet sparked off some kind of energy shield. The intruder stepped into the light, and Walter's blood went cold. It was reptilian, but nothing like Ember's graceful form. This creature was built for killing. 7 feet tall, covered in thick, scarred scales. Its eyes were small and cruel, and its hands ended in claws that looked like they could tear through steel. It wore armor that pulsed with dim red light. The creature spoke in a language Walter didn't understand, harsh and guttural, but the meaning was clear when it raised a weapon, something that hummed with contained energy, and pointed it at him. Ember shot out from the bedroom, placing herself between Walter and the hunter. She was so much smaller, barely reaching the hunter's knee, but she spread her wings and hissed. Blue energy crackled around her mouth. The hunter laughed, a terrible sound. It said something else and took a step forward. Walter didn't think. He grabbed a wrench from his tool belt and threw it as hard as he could. It bounced harmlessly off the shield, but it got the hunter's attention. Those cruel eyes fixed on him. "Yeah, you," Walter growled. "You want her? You go through me first." The hunter aimed its weapon at Walter's head. Time seemed to slow. Walter saw the energy building, saw Ember screaming silently, saw his own death approaching. Then Ember unleashed everything she had. The blast of blue plasma was far stronger than any of her previous attempts. It hit the hunter's shield and shattered it in a shower of sparks. The energy continued forward, catching the hunter in the chest and sending it flying backward through the broken door. Walter grabbed Ember and ran for the back exit. Behind them, he heard the hunter roaring in pain and rage. They crashed through the workshop and out into the night. Walter's truck sat 50 yards away. If they could just reach it. The hunter appeared in front of them, moving impossibly fast despite its wound. Burned scales and armor, but still standing. Still hunting. Walter changed direction, heading for the forest. He knew these woods better than anyone. Maybe he could use that advantage. Ember clung to his shoulder, her claws digging through his shirt. He could feel her exhaustion. That blast had drained her completely. The hunter pursued them, crashing through undergrowth. Walter used every trick he knew. He crossed streams to break their scent trail. He led them through dense thickets. He doubled back and hid in a hollow tree, holding his breath while the hunter passed within arm's reach. Finally, as dawn began to break, Walter heard something beautiful. Helicopters, the government agents, responding to the disturbance. The hunter heard them too. It looked at Walter one last time, and he felt the promise in that gaze. This wasn't over. The hunter would return. Then it activated something on its armor and vanished, turning nearly invisible as it retreated into the forest. Walter slumped against a tree, gasping for breath. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might burst. Ember pressed against his chest and he wrapped his arms around her protectively. Soldiers found them 10 minutes later. Agent Ford was with them, her face grim. "Mr. Grimsby, I think it's time you told us everything." Walter looked at Ember, then at the soldiers, then back to Ford. He was too tired to lie anymore. "Her name is Ember," he said quietly. "She's just a child, and something out there is hunting her." The military wanted to take Ember immediately. Agent Ford called it protective custody, but Walter knew better. He saw the way some of the soldiers looked at Ember with cold, calculating eyes. They saw a specimen, a weapon, a thing to be studied. Walter refused to let go of her. "She stays with me, or you'll have to shoot an old man." "Your choice." Ford studied him for a long moment, then surprised him. "Fine, but we're moving you both to a secure location. That thing that attacked you might come back with friends." They were transported to a military facility 3 hours away, not the secret research base Walter had feared, but a standard security compound with actual medical staff and reasonable amenities. Ford explained during the drive that they were still figuring out what to do. The creature that attacked them had been captured on satellite footage, and it had scared some important people. "We're not the biggest fish in the pond anymore," Ford said quietly. "That changes things." At the compound, Walter and Ember were given a suite of rooms. Comfortable but guarded. A young medic examined Ember's injuries, working carefully under Walter's watchful eye. The medic, whose name tag read Phillips, treated Ember with genuine care. "She's extraordinary," Phillips said, checking the healing wing. "The tissue regeneration is unlike anything I've seen. She should be able to fly within a week." Over the next several days, something unexpected happened. The soldiers and staff who interacted with Ember began to see her differently. It started with Phillips, who brought her special treats and spoke to her gently. Then a guard named Rodriguez started sitting with them during his breaks, fascinated by Ember's intelligence. Ember was curious about everything. She learned quickly that certain sounds meant certain things. She started responding to her name. She figured out how to open doors. She played fetch with a ball Phillips brought her, though she preferred to use her mouth rather than her claws. Walter watched her blossom. Away from the constant fear and pain, Ember's personality emerged. She was playful, clever, and surprisingly funny. She learned that Walter laughed when she did certain things like stealing his reading glasses, and she would do them repeatedly just to hear that sound. But Walter also noticed she never strayed far from him. Even when others offered food or toys, she always looked to him first, permission, reassurance. He realized with a weight in his chest that he had become her entire world. On the 5th day, a new person arrived. A young woman in civilian clothes, maybe 30 years old, with bright eyes and an easy smile. She knocked on their door politely and waited for Walter to answer. "Mr. Grimsby, my name is Casey Roth. I'm a wildlife biologist. Agent Ford asked me to consult on Ember's care." Walter let her in cautiously. But Casey won him over quickly. She treated Ember as a living being with feelings and needs, not as a curiosity. She brought literature on animal psychology and compared notes with Walter about Ember's behavior. "She's bonded to you," Casey explained. "It's called imprinting. You're the first being she trusted after her trauma. In her mind, you're family." The word hit Walter hard. Family. He hadn't had family since Martha died, since his daughter Sarah was killed in that accident years ago. He had been empty for so long, just going through motions. But Ember had filled that emptiness without him even realizing it. Casey visited every day, and eventually she began to trust Walter enough to share secrets. She told him about a network of people, civilians and military alike, who believed humanity needed to prepare for contact with alien species properly. Not with weapons and suspicion, but with open minds and compassion. "There are more of us than you'd think," Casey said. "We've been ready for this moment. Ready to show that humanity can be better than our worst impulses." She told Walter about the crystal's contents. Military analysts had been studying it, and they had partially translated some of the data. Ember's species were called Draconians. They were an ancient race of explorers and scholars, peaceful by nature. They had encountered another species, the Krill, who were conquering their way across the galaxy. "The Krill want Ember because young Draconians can be trained," Casey explained quietly. "Their plasma abilities make them powerful weapons if you break them early enough." Ember's parents were fleeing. They were ambassadors looking for allies. But the Krill found them first. Walter felt sick. He looked at Ember, who was playing with a puzzle toy Casey had brought. Just a child, just a baby who had lost everything. "There's something else," Casey continued. "We've been monitoring space. There are more Krill ships coming. They're not giving up on her. And the government is divided on what to do. Some want to hand her over to avoid conflict. Others want to weaponize her ourselves." "Over my dead body," Walter said flatly. Casey smiled sadly. "That's what I was hoping you'd say. Because there might be another option." She explained her plan. There was an old research facility in the mountains, abandoned for a decade. It had equipment that could be repurposed, including a communications array powerful enough to send signals deep into space. If they could get Ember there, they might be able to send a distress call to other Draconians. "Assuming any survived, it's a long shot," Casey admitted. "But it's better than what will happen if she stays here." That night, Walter couldn't sleep. He sat in his room watching Ember curl up in her bed, her scales glowing softly in the darkness. She trusted him completely. She had asked him that wordless question in the beginning. "Can I trust you?" He had said yes. Now he had to prove it. Memories surfaced unbidden. Sarah, his daughter, asking him to teach her about the stars. He had been too busy then, always too busy with work. He had promised later, next week, soon. Then she was gone, and later never came. He wouldn't make that mistake again. Ember needed him now, not later. Now Walter made his decision. He would get Ember to that facility. He would send the call. And if Draconians came, if they offered to take her somewhere safe, he would let her go. Even if it broke his heart. Because that was what real love meant, putting someone else's needs above your own. He walked over and gently stroked Ember's head. She stirred, made a small chirping sound, and pressed into his hand. Through their connection, he felt her emotions, contentment, safety, love. "I've got you, little one," Walter whispered. "I promise. I've got you." Morning came with news that made their escape urgent. Agent Ford visited with a grim face. Orders came down from the top. They're transferring Ember to a research facility tomorrow. Maximum security. They're calling it protection, but we both know what it really is. Walter looked at Casey, who had arrived minutes earlier. Their eyes met. It had to be tonight. Ford saw the look pass between them. Instead of raising alarm, she simply said, "I'll be off duty at midnight." The guard rotation changes then. There's a 10-minute window when the north gate is understaffed. Walter stared at her. "You're helping us?" Ford looked at Ember, who was watching them with intelligent eyes. "I joined the military to protect people. All people. That includes her." She handed Walter a key card. "This will get you through the first 2 checkpoints. After that, you're on your own." As Ford left, Casey gripped Walter's hand. "I'll drive. I know the route. We leave at midnight." Walter nodded and began packing. It was time to run again. But this time they were running toward something. Toward hope. Midnight arrived with a cold wind. Casey's van waited at the north gate, engine running. Walter carried Ember wrapped in a blanket, moving as quickly as his old legs allowed. Ford's keycard worked perfectly. The gates opened with barely a whisper. They drove through darkness for hours, leaving highways for back roads, then dirt roads. Casey knew routes that didn't show up on GPS. The old research facility sat deep in a mountain range, forgotten by everyone except those who had worked there decades ago. Dawn painted the sky purple when they finally arrived. The facility looked like something from a ghost story. 3 buildings clustered around a central tower, all made of concrete and steel gone rusty with age. Broken windows stared like empty eyes. Nature had been slowly reclaiming it, vines crawling up walls and grass pushing through cracked pavement. "This is it," Casey said. "The main communications array is in the tower. If it still works." Walter stepped out of the van, Ember in his arms. The place stirred old memories. He had worked at facilities like this in his youth. They all had the same feeling of ambitious dreams abandoned when funding dried up. They entered through a side door Casey had to force open. Inside smelled of dust and decay. Their footsteps echoed through empty corridors. Most of the equipment had been stripped years ago, but the main array remained in the tower's top floor. It was too big to easily remove, too outdated to be worth the effort. Walter examined it while Casey set up a portable generator she had brought. The array was ancient by modern standards, but the fundamentals were solid. He had worked with similar systems. He could make this work. "We need to realign the dish and boost the power," he said, already planning the repairs. "Give me a few hours." While Walter worked, Casey kept watch. Ember explored the tower, fascinated by the abandoned equipment. She chirped at old computer screens and pawed at cables. Walter found himself smiling despite their situation. She made everything feel less hopeless. 3 hours later, Walter had the array operational. It wouldn't win any prizes, but it would send a signal strong enough to reach nearby star systems. The question was whether anyone would be listening. "Ember, I need your help," Walter said. She trotted over immediately. Walter pointed to the communications panel he had jury-rigged. "Your people's signals. Can you show me?" Ember tilted her head, thinking. Then she placed a claw on the crystal they had brought with them. Holographic displays flickered to life, showing wave patterns and frequencies that were definitely not human-made. "Smart girl," Walter said warmly. He began programming the array to match those frequencies. It took another hour of fine-tuning, but finally everything was ready. "Ember, I need you to send a message," Walter explained. "Something your people will recognize. Can you do that?" Ember understood. She approached the microphone Walter had connected and opened her mouth. The sound that came out was nothing like her usual chirps. It was deeper, resonant, a song that seemed to echo with harmonics that human ears couldn't quite process. It was beautiful and heartbreaking, a call from a lost child searching for family. The array transmitted. The signal shot out into space, carrying Ember's voice toward the stars. Now they could only wait. Casey made sandwiches from the supplies they had brought. They ate in silence, watching the monitors for any response. Hours passed. Walter began to think they had failed. Maybe there were no draconians left to answer. Maybe they were all gone. Then alarms shattered the quiet. "Incoming ships," Casey said, checking a tablet connected to satellite feeds. Multiple signatures. Moving fast, Walter's stomach dropped.
Krill?
"Yes, but there's something else. Another signature, different from the Krill. Larger. It's coming from outside the solar system." Before Walter could respond, the building shook. An explosion somewhere outside. Then gunfire. "They found us," Casey said, pulling out a pistol Walter hadn't known she was carrying. The Krill must have been monitoring all frequencies. They tracked the signal. Walter grabbed Ember and moved away from the windows. Through the cracked glass he could see shapes moving in the forest. Many shapes. Krill soldiers, just like the hunter who had attacked his cabin, but more of them. "A strike team. We need to hold them off," Casey said. "Just long enough for help to arrive. If help arrives." She positioned herself at the window and fired at the approaching Krill. Her shots were precise, trained. 2 Krill dropped before the others activated shields. They returned fire with energy weapons that tore chunks out of the building's walls. Walter looked around frantically for anything useful. His eyes landed on the old equipment. Power conduits. Electrical systems. An idea formed. "Casey, keep them back for 2 minutes," he shouted. He ran to the generator and began rerouting power. The facility's old defense systems were still intact, designed to protect sensitive research from industrial espionage. He had helped design similar systems. If he could just remember the configurations. The Krill breached the lower floor. Walter heard them moving through the building, their alien voices coordinating the attack. Casey fell back to the tower stairs, firing down at them. But there were too many. Walter's fingers flew over corroded controls. Come on, there, the system sparked to life. Automated defenses activated. Electricity arced through metal corridors, catching 3 Krill soldiers and dropping them instantly. But more kept coming. Then the entire building shook with a different kind of impact. A massive shadow fell across the windows. Walter looked up and his breath caught. A ship. Enormous, graceful, its hull gleaming even in the early morning light. It was beautiful in a way human ships never were. Organic curves and flowing lines. And on its side, markings that matched the symbols on Ember's crystal. Draconian. The ship opened fire on the Krill forces with precision. Not destructive beams meant to obliterate, but targeted pulses that disabled shields and weapons. Several Krill ships in orbit tried to flee. The Draconian vessel pursued them effortlessly, faster than anything Earth had ever built. Human military jets arrived seconds later, responding to the chaos. For a moment, Walter feared they would attack both alien forces. But then something unexpected happened. A new voice came over the old radio system, speaking clear English. "This is General Rita Osei of Earth Defense Command. All forces, stand down. I repeat, stand down." A military convoy pulled up to the facility. General Osei stepped out, a tall woman with iron gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. She looked at the Draconian ship, then at the facility, calculating rapidly. Soldiers poured in, securing the remaining Krill and establishing a perimeter. General Osei climbed the tower stairs and found Walter, Casey, and Ember huddled in the communications room. "Mr. Grimsby, I presume," she said. "You've caused quite a situation." "Ma'am, I can explain," Walter started. Osei held up a hand. "The Krill have sent a delegation. They're offering us technology, weapons, anything we want, in exchange for the Draconian child." Walter stepped in front of Ember. "No. They're saying if we refuse, they'll consider Earth hostile. They'll add us to their list of conquests. Then I guess we're hostile," Walter said firmly, "because she's not a bargaining chip. She's a child who did nothing wrong except survive." General Osei stared at him for a long moment. Then incredibly she smiled. "That's what I was hoping you'd say, because I've been a soldier for 30 years and I'm tired of wars started by bullies." She turned to one of her officers. "Get me a line to the Krill ship. Tell them Earth's answer is no. Tell them if they have a problem with that, they can take it up with our new allies." She pointed at the Draconian ship, which had settled into a stable orbit above them. "And someone get me in contact with that vessel. It's time we introduced ourselves properly." The Draconian ship descended slowly, landing in a clearing near the facility with the kind of precision that made Earth's best pilots look clumsy. It was even more magnificent up close. The hull seemed to shimmer with contained light, and Walter could see now that it was covered in scales like embers, as if the ship itself was a living thing. A ramp extended from the ship's side. 3 figures emerged and Walter's breath caught. They were like Ember but fully grown. Each stood about 9 feet tall at the shoulder when on all fours, though they could rear up on hind legs to nearly 15 feet. Their wingspans, even folded, were massive. Scales in deep purples, blues, and greens caught the sunlight and threw it back in rainbow patterns. The lead Draconian was ancient, Walter could tell. Its scales had faded to a soft silver, and its eyes held depths of wisdom and sorrow. It walked with dignity despite obvious age, and the 2 younger Draconians flanked it protectively. Ember made a sound Walter had never heard before. A cry of recognition and desperate hope. She pulled away from him and ran toward the Draconians on legs that had grown stronger over the past weeks. She called out in that resonant language, the song of her people. The elder Draconian's eyes widened. It moved forward and lowered its great head, touching Ember gently with its snout. The 2 younger Draconians surrounded them both, creating a protective circle. Walter felt a wave of emotion that wasn't his own. Relief, joy, grief for those lost, love for this child who had survived. General Osei stood beside Walter, Casey on his other side. They watched in silence as the Draconians communed with Ember. Finally, the elder raised its head and looked at the humans. It spoke, and somehow Walter understood. Not words exactly, but meaning pressed into his mind. "Thank you for protecting our child. We felt her call across the stars. We came as fast as we could." Osei stepped forward. "I am General Rita Osei, speaking for Earth's Unified Defense Command. We need to understand what's happening. The Krill have threatened us for harboring your child." The elder Draconian's expression was unreadable to human eyes, but Walter felt its contempt for the Krill. "They threatened us too once. They threatened many species. That is their way. Conquer, enslave, destroy. They expand like a plague. Why didn't you fight back? Osi asked. We did, we lost. The emotional weight behind those words was crushing. Our civilization spanned 1,000 worlds. We were scholars, artists, explorers. We knew nothing of war. The Krill knew only war. They killed billions of us before we understood what they were. Now we are scattered, refugees fleeing through the stars hoping to find safe harbor. How many of you are left? Not enough. The elder turned back to Ember. This child's parents were ambassadors seeking allies. They were killed before they could deliver their message. But the child survived. And you protected her, though you had no reason to. Though it brought danger to your world, Walter spoke up. We protected her because it was the right thing to do. She was hurt and scared and alone. What else would we do? The elder Draconian studied him for a long moment. Your species is young. You have barely left your own world. Yet you show wisdom that older races have forgotten. The Krill offered you power in exchange for one small life. Many would have taken that bargain. You refused. We're not perfect, Osei said honestly. There are humans who would have made that trade. But there are more of us who wouldn't. We're trying to be better than our worst instincts. The elder seemed pleased by this. That is all any species can do. Try, fail, try again. It looked around at the assembled soldiers. At Casey, at Walter. We came to retrieve our child. But we also came to deliver the message her parents died trying to send. The galaxy is at war. The Krill grow stronger each year. But there is a coalition of refugee species. Those who survived the Krill onslaught. We call ourselves the Fellowship. We offer humanity membership. What would that mean? Osei asked carefully. It means alliance, protection, shared technology and knowledge. It means joining others who believe in coexistence rather than conquest. It means preparing for the day when the Krill come in force, because they will come. Today's threat was merely a test. When they return, it will be with fleets. Osei looked at Walter, then at the other soldiers and officers who had gathered. This was bigger than any of them. This was humanity's first real step into galactic society. The decision couldn't be made here, not by one person. But she could set humanity on the path. We'll need time to discuss this with our leaders, Osei said. But personally, I think we'd be fools to refuse. We can't stand alone against something like the Krill. The elder nodded its massive head. We understand. We will remain in orbit while you deliberate. But there is one more matter. It looked at Ember and Walter's heart clenched. We must take the child with us. She needs to be among her own kind. She needs teachers who can help her develop her abilities. She needs other children to grow with. Walter had known this moment was coming. He had prepared himself for it. But preparation didn't make it hurt less. He walked over to where Ember sat with the adult Draconians. She looked up at him with those large, expressive eyes. You have to go with them, little one, Walter said softly. His voice cracked. They're your family. Your real family. They can give you things I never could. Ember made a distressed sound. Through their connection, Walter felt her conflict. She wanted to stay. She wanted to go. She was confused and scared and sad all at once. I know, Walter said, kneeling down so he was at her level. His knees protested, but he ignored them. I know you want to stay. Part of me wants that too. But you need to grow up with your own people. You need to learn about where you came from, who you are. I can't teach you that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crystal, the one that had taught him how to care for her. Take this. Remember where you came from. Remember your parents. And maybe sometimes remember the grumpy old human who took you in. Ember pressed her head against his chest. Walter wrapped his arms around her, feeling her warmth, feeling the gentle thrum of her heartbeat. Tears ran down his face. He hadn't cried since Martha's funeral, but this was worth crying over. The elder Draconian spoke gently. She will not forget. Draconians remember everything, every kindness, every friend. She will carry you in her heart always. Walter forced himself to let go, to step back. Ember watched him with devastation in her eyes, but the adult Draconian surrounded her gently, guiding her toward the ship. She kept looking back, kept calling to him in her language. The elder paused before entering the ship. It approached Walter and lowered its head. From its neck it pulled a single scale. The scale was large, easily the size of Walter's palm, and it glowed with soft inner light. This is a gift, the elder said. A token of our gratitude. It will allow you to sense the child even across the stars. When she thinks of you, it will warm. When she is happy, it will glow brighter. You saved her life. We give you this connection so you need never be parted completely. Walter took the scale with shaking hands. It was warm and smooth, and he felt the immediate connection to Ember strengthen through it. "Thank you," he whispered. The Draconians boarded their ship. The ramp retracted. The ship lifted off with impossible grace, rising into the sky and accelerating until it was just a point of light. Then nothing. Walter stood in the clearing, holding the scale. Around him, soldiers and officers began returning to their duties. Plans needed to be made. The world needed to know what had happened today. Everything was changing. But Walter just stood there, feeling the warmth from the scale, feeling Ember's distant presence. Sad but also curious, excited. She was seeing her people's ship, meeting others her age, beginning a new life. Casey put her hand on Walter's shoulder. "You did the right thing." "I know," Walter said. "Doesn't make it easier." General Osei approached. "Mr. Grimsby, I have a feeling we're going to need you in the coming days. You have experience with Draconians that no other human can claim. Will you help us? Help us learn how to be good allies?" Walter looked at the scale in his hands, then at the sky where the ship had vanished. "Yes," he said. "Yes, I'll help. For her sake, so humanity can be worthy of what she taught us." 3 years passed. Walter lived in a small apartment near the New Earth Fellowship Embassy. His hair had gone completely white, and his body moved slower than ever. But his mind was sharp, and he kept busy consulting with diplomats and scientists who were learning about dozens of alien species. Earth had officially joined the Fellowship. The Krill had tested humanity twice more with small raids, but Earth's improved defenses, combined with Fellowship support, had driven them back each time. Humanity had proven it could hold its own. Walter still kept Ember's scale with him always. It glowed often, usually when he thought about her at night. He hoped that meant she was doing well, growing strong, learning about her people's history and culture. One evening, as Walter sat on his small balcony watching the sunset, the scale suddenly blazed with light, brighter than it had ever been. Warm enough that he gasped. He looked up and saw a ship descending, not the massive vessel from 3 years ago, but a smaller, sleeker craft. It landed in the embassy courtyard, and Walter's heart began to race. The ship's door opened. A Draconian emerged, young but no longer a child. Ember had grown. She was now the size of a large horse, her wings fully developed and magnificent. Her scales had deepened to a rich purple with threads of gold. But those eyes were the same. She saw Walter and called out in joy. Then she did something impossible. She spoke in careful, accented English. "Walter, my friend, my family." Walter stood, gripping the balcony railing for support. Ember crossed the courtyard in seconds and reared up, placing her front claws gently on the balcony. She was enormous now, powerful and beautiful, but she was gentle as she touched her snout to Walter's face. "You came back," Walter said through tears. "You came back. I promised myself I would," Ember said. "When I grew strong enough, when I learned enough to be useful, I am an ambassador now, like my parents. I speak for my people, and I wanted you to meet the new me, to see what your kindness created." Walter touched her scales, feeling the familiar texture. "I never stopped thinking about you. I know. I felt it through the scale. Every day I felt your love." Ember settled down, making herself comfortable. "I have much to tell you. About my people, about the Fellowship, about the war with the Krill, and I want to hear about you, about Earth, about everything." Walter smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in 3 years. "I've got time, all the time in the world." As the sun set, casting golden light across the embassy, Walter and Ember talked about the past, about the future, about trust that had been given and proven worthy. In the beginning, Ember had asked a question. "Can I trust you?" Walter had answered yes, and in doing so he had changed not just one life but 2, perhaps even an entire world's destiny. Trust, he realized, was the most powerful force in the universe. Stronger than weapons, stronger than fear, strong enough to bridge the gap between species and stars, strong enough to answer the most important question anyone could ask.